Hello and welcome. A crisis of identity? But that's what Turkey seems to be facing as it heads into national elections this July. At the center of it all is a growing struggle between the traditionally more successful urban elite and military versus a growing middle class grounded in more conservative religious values. Now, since the religiously rooted AK party came to power in 2002, tensions have been slowly growing. The situation came to a head recently as more than 1 million protesters took to the streets voicing their support for Turkey's secular system. At the same time, national polls indicate that a majority of Turks do not feel the secular system is in jeopardy at all. So what's all the fuss about? Well, today's show we'll look at the multiple challenges facing Turkey, including a recent upsurge in attacks by Kurdish separatist groups and the country's lingering bid for EU membership. Now, don't forget, we take your phone calls and mobile phone texts on this program. The numbers are at the bottom of your screen now. We're here in Washington. I'm joined by Dr. Bülent Alireza, Director of the Turkey Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and Dr. Ömer Taspenar, the Director of the Turkey Program at the Brookings Institution. Good to have you both here, gents. Dr. Alireza, I should kick off with you now. What on earth is happening with Turkey? You know, here's a country that's always said it's a model secular state. It's a bridge between Europe and Asia. Why suddenly these divisions coming out so strongly?
Not so suddenly. Actually, this has been building up for some time. The population has become more religious, more devout, and a party rooted in the Islamist movement, but which denies that it's Islamist, in the sense of wanting to change the constitution and go to the Sharia, and which has said that it's willing to live according to the secular principles of the country, has found that there are limits to the democratic system in that it was unable to elect a president from its ranks. It found itself challenged by the Constitutional Court and by the military, and as you said in the introduction, by hundreds of thousands of people marching in the streets, effectively saying, in effect saying that they're not happy with this party being in power. So what we're seeing is the end of the ad hoc cohabitation between the secular system and those who are more religiously inclined, who are now seeking political power.
Now, before I get to Istanbul from a word from there, let me ask Dr. Ömer Taspenar, is it time for the military to move in again? I mean, the military has said it's the defender of the constitution and the secular state, and has actually organized coups to do that in the past. What do you think is going to happen now?
I think the military is very nervous. They see Islamization in Turkey, and they try to galvanize civil society, the press, the media. However, I think that the days of tanks in the streets, open military coups are over. The last coup we had in Turkey was in 1997. It was coined a postmodern coup because we didn't really have tanks in the street, but it was a memorandum to the prime minister who was forced to resign. This time what we had about a month ago on the 27th of April was called the e-coup because it was on the website of the Turkish General Staff, harshly warning the government that they're ready to assume their responsibilities in case there is a risk to secularism. So the military is nervous, but I don't think there is a real risk of an open coup.
But the e-coup was taken seriously.
Very much seriously. That derailed the whole process. In fact, it was a blatant intervention into the judicial process, and it was taken much seriously by the Turkish parliament. This is why we're going to early elections in Turkey.
Well, let's get across to Istanbul, where we're joined by Zeynep Aran, who's the director for of the Center for Eurasian Policy at the Hudson Institute. Zeynep Aran, good to have you with us, and I want to kick off and get an impression from you. What's happening there in Turkey right now? As things stand, it seems a little suspended. What's the word on the street there?
Well, actually, people are extremely polarized. On the one hand, you have the people basically saying that the inability to get a Gül elected president needs to be turned into a referendum on headscarves and on religiosity and democracy. On the other hand, you have people basically really saying there is a gradual erosion of the secular system. Yes, there is not going to be Sharia establishment tomorrow, but in a 10-20 year period, there's going to be this gradual change. So it's actually very difficult to now have people talk about these things in a rational way. Everyone is very emotional. And of course, on top of it, we have PKK terrorism in the country. The political parties using very, very emotional language, and everyone is saying, how are we going to get through to July 22nd when the elections are going to take place?
Zeno, I wonder how you handle some of the, or how you explain some of the contradictions that occur in Turkey, though. For example, the fact that women aren't allowed to wear headscarves, the hijab, to university, for example, or into government workplaces, it seems to contradict the concept of democracy.
Well, it contradicts maybe the concept of democracy in terms of freedom of religion, freedom of choice. But remember, we're talking about a country that is a secular democratic republic. And repeatedly in these, especially in these polarized periods, when people say if we have to choose between secularism and democracy, some people say we'll choose secularism first, because without keeping state and religion separate, we cannot have democracy. And also those people point out that headscarf issue has become a political Islam, and the symbolism being headscarves has become a big issue over the last 10, 15 years. Before, in Turkey and in many parts of the world, headscarves was really mostly a personal choice. And you know, again, in Turkey, women can wear the headscarf in their private life. The issue becomes, you know, at what point do you say that wearing the headscarf in public places and government would threaten the secular establishment?
Now, I know, Dr. Bulent Ali Reza, you don't entirely agree with Zeno Baran's point here, do you, on this?
I don't want to comment directly on what has just been said, but you know, frankly, Turkey is going through a very difficult phase. And it's important for everybody involved, those who are involved in the process, and even the rest of us who are on the outside trying to analyze and make sense of it, to understand that if things go wrong in Turkey, they'll go very badly wrong.
What do you suggest to find some kind of balance between those who are, say, moderate secularists and moderate devout Muslims? Well,
what I argued in the last update that we put out a couple of weeks ago was the need for a new national consensus. Clearly, the consensus that existed before has broken down. The founders of the modern Turkish state never envisaged people who are as religious as the AK Party and those who are their followers getting to a position when they would not only have the majority in the National Assembly, not only have the Prime Minister, but even have a shot at winning the presidency in accordance with the Constitution. And clearly, in the absence of that consensus, we had that confrontation. And the confrontation could get much worse. And in the you know, for the sake of the country, what we need is a new national consensus that allows for greater tolerance towards the religious, those who are religiously inclined within society, and accommodate as much as possible their desire to exercise their religion, both in their individual lives and as much as possible in their choice of those that they wish to see serve in government within the limits of secularism. Now, do we have the answer? We don't. That's why we have the tension. But frankly, without that consensus, there's going to be a lot more trouble. Well,
Dr. Omar Tasmanal, what do you suggest? I know you see that there is some confusion in the way the West, for example, sees the protests in Turkey when the slogan's being chanted, no Sharia, no coup.
That's right. There is a perception in Turkey among the middle-class, secular, urban Turks that the Sharia is around the corner. Somehow Turkey will become Iran. Nothing could be further from the truth. Turkey is actually a country that practices a very moderate kind of Islam. Turkish Islam has little to do with activist Wahhabism or any kind of more radical versions of Islam. And this government, which strangely enough is being suspect now for having a hidden agenda, has been in power for the last 5 years. And they've done wonders in terms of Turkey's chances of joining the European Union, of improving human rights, curbing basically authoritarianism, improving cultural rights for minorities. My question is, what else they need to do to prove that they are actually Democrats? The problem is with secularism in Turkey. Frankly enough, this Turkish secularism is much more radical than the kind of Islam we see in Turkey. They see everything as a zero-sum game. They see in headscarves the harbinger of a fundamentalist revolution. And what we have in Turkey is this French-type Jacobin secularism, which is anti-religious. And if we need a consensus, as Bülent Rıza explained, we need actually a consensus about secularism, not about Islam, because Islam is not the problem in Turkey. As far as I see it, the real problem is this Kemalist establishment, which has a very outdated, anachronistic understanding of secularism.
Now, I know, Dr. Ali Raza, you want to respond, but let me get a call in because we have viewers coming in with questions here. So Asghar in Manchester in the UK has a question. Go ahead, Asghar.
Okay. Hi, Riz.
Hi.
Either. Yeah, it's very confusing. Turkey is 90% Muslim, but yet Turkey bans its own religion. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, are the Turkish people actually ashamed of being Muslim, or is this kind of being thrust upon them? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, a Christian country wouldn't ban the cross.
Right, Asghar, that's an interesting point. Before I get to Istanbul, Dr. Ali Raza.
Well, what I was actually going to add to what Ömer Taşpınar just said was about the stalled EU process. Now, clearly, if the EU process was progressing faster than it is, and if the Europeans were not having the kind of misgivings about letting this Muslim country, or country where the predominant religion is Islam, then we may not be thinking about the kind of tensions and even the possibility of a coup that we are talking about. So, you know, the EU process is very much a part of the equation. Now, in terms of what the question just raised, no, I don't think that Turks are ashamed of their religion. Everybody acknowledges that they're Muslims. What we're having a discussion about is the manifestation of Islam, not just in personal life, but in public life, and ultimately whether a party which is made up predominantly of devout Muslims will be able to get somebody elected president and run the country without people fearing that it's actually going to lead to the Sharia.
Right. Let's get across to Istanbul, and Zeynep Baran, I want you to listen to this soundbite from Abdullah Gül, who's blocked from his presidential bid. Gentlemen, listen to this as well. And if you can hear this clearly, I'd like to get your comment on this after you hear this.
Democracy is active in Turkey. Turkey is not the Turkey of the 1960s, 70s, or 1980s. Even today's meeting shows that we are an accession country. Political crises happen, but we are not looking at them. We are looking at the future. Reform process will continue with its full vigor.
And yet, Zeynep Baran, there seems to be some contradiction with what Abdullah Gül is saying and the position he's found himself in.
Well, that's true. I mean, the AK Party has been really the strongest pro-EU party since it took office. And what Abdullah Gül and others from the party has said that, of course, Europe's freedom and democracy agenda is something that really excites them, and that's where we would like to take Turkey in. And going back to the also maybe to the caller from England, what of course has happened over the last 4 or 5 years is that Europe itself has started to look at Muslim integration and showing of outwardly religious symbols such as headscarf and burqa and other forms of clothing an issue. So this is unfortunately happening at a time when Europe itself is questioning, how to integrate its Muslims. And of course, the difficult thing to understand is that in Turkey, you have about 99% of the people Muslim from different levels of practicing, but then the institutions are very much adapted based on the Swiss and the French and the German model. So you have very Western, very secular institutions and very faithful and religious and spiritual people. Zeynep? And the two often come into conflict.
I want a very quick answer to this email we got from John Kelly from London in the UK, who says, Turkey's demographics are decidedly Islamist, and the Kemalist ethic is both outmoded, belligerent, and will ultimately hold the country back. Mr. Erdogan should call the military's bluff. How do you respond to that?
In Turkey, when the Islamist side, and I'm not calling Prime Minister Erdogan Islamist, but when the Islamist side goes into confrontation with this state, people do not, in general, want to be in that kind of confrontation. And I think Prime Minister Erdogan did call the military's bluff by appointing Foreign Minister Gül as the president, and he really did not expect this outcome. So if he and his party go into much more confrontational direction, I fear we're going to have much more confrontation from the other side. And we could see even stronger reaction from the military.
Squeeze in a very quick question to Dr. Omar Tashpinar here. It's from Mark Abedi in Vancouver in Canada. This email question, just a quick answer to this. Turkey doesn't need more democracy. Democracy will destroy the secular state, it will embolden the fanatics, and they will exploit the democratic state to create a state in their own image.
Well, there is similar fear-mongering among the crowds in Turkey. The military is trying to, I think, to a certain degree, carry the same message that secularism is in danger in Turkey, and that what we need is not more democracy, but more secularism. Well, my comment to that is that the Middle East as a region, for instance, is full of authoritarian regimes. What Turkey needs, and what makes Turkey really interesting for the West, is the fact that it is a democracy.
Well, we have a lot to debate, but I want to thank you, Dr. Omar, Dr. Bulut Ali Razatu, and Zainab Baran. We've run out of time, a lot more to discuss. Hopefully we'll touch on this again soon. Thank you for being with us. On tomorrow's show, we'll look at the impact of the 1967 war 40 years later. Don't forget, if you have any thoughts about pressing issues around the world, send your emails to riz@aljazeera.net. We'll see you next time. Street Talk is coming up next.